Welcome to the Select Committee on School Facilities. We're meeting this morning both as a statutory requirement. We are required on the Select Committee to meet quarterly. So this will meet that requirement. And then in addition to that, hopefully we can have a good visit about what we want the interim to look like. I think we've got some things that we'll discuss with our agency folks and with Matt and Tanya this morning that that would be fruitful for us to maybe dig into. So Matt and Andrea, or Matt and Tanya. I have a sister-in-law, Andrea, and her husband is Matt. So that just came out. That's my Minnesota relatives. Okay, so we would love to have you come forward, Tanya, if you could, just to kind of brief us as an intro to this Select Committee on School Facilities. We're a little rummy by the time we get to the end of a budget session, so remind us what this committee is all about, would you please?
Mr. Chairman, while they get settled, do you mind if I take a roll call real quick?
Yeah, we should. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem. For Select Committee on School Facilities, March 5th, 2026, Senator Dockstader, Senator McEwen, here. Senator Rothfuss,
Excused.
Senator Love,
here.
Representative Bratton,
Here.
Representative Geringer,
Here.
Representative Heft,
Here.
Representative Provenza,
Here.
Vice Chairman Angelos,
Here.
Chairman Landon.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much for the reminder. Sometimes on the Senate side, we don't take roll, but Tanya, good morning. Walk us into statutory requirements and things like that the School Facilities Committee is all about.
Sure.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Tanya Heitrick, Operations Administrator with LSO. As the chairman said, you do have some statutory duties for the Select Committee. I'll go ahead and run through those quickly, but they're basically to monitor the statewide fleet of K-12 schools along with the state construction department and prioritize the needs for the upcoming interim and prepare a budget, which is required to be submitted no later than November 1st by this committee to the Joint Appropriations Committee. And then secondly, to just develop knowledge and expertise with regard to K-12 school facilities and the process of prioritizing those. That includes things like major maintenance, any construction, design, demolition, planning, those types of items. And then also, just as a reminder, there is the litigation hanging out there as well. And there's one element directly related to this committee, which is the Chapter 3, Section 8 exception process, which is contained in the state construction's rules and regulations. You might recall that somewhat relates to educational suitability. And the court found that particular process unconstitutional. And last year, this committee went to Management Council and requested authority to secure a consultant to undertake that work. Management Council granted that request. And in conversations with Chairman Landon, he's indicated that he'd like to take that work up this interim. So we'll start the search to secure that particular professional. And with that, subject to the committee's questions, Mr. Chairman.
Tanya, thank you. It's always really helpful. Appreciate that. Committee, any questions of our outstanding team? Matt, going into this interim, one of the things, I don't see it on the list. I submitted an interim topic and it probably just didn't get there, but we have talked about a full understanding. I don't know if this committee feels the way I do, but I don't feel all the way up to speed with respect to what the things we have done lately have done to maintenance funding. What happens when more and more students stay at home, or what happens when they go to a charter school? What are the differences in the charter schools that some you count the ADMs and some you don't? But our funding formula does involve those ADMs. And then on top of that, we have we have been concerned that every student be able to use these facilities. So can you comment on that? I want to make sure that we understand the full picture of how we fund those facilities out there, based on some of the things we've done.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Matthew Wilmarth, LSO, Senior School Finance Analyst. With regards to your questions, we're happy to dust off some of our old issue briefs or fact sheets surrounding just routine maintenance and major maintenance, and how student ADM or average daily membership interacts with the allocation of resources for both routine maintenance funding and major maintenance funding. One of the components is the number of students that generates the allowable square footage of a building. And in some instances, buildings are larger than what that allowable square footage is. And so the number of resources allocated for some schools or districts may not meet that full array of square footage that they have in their inventory. So we're happy to dig a little bit deeper and provide some expertise to the committee on how that interrelates to those formulas. And we kind of discussed that a little bit last interim, and there was a bill draft sponsored by the committee that would have provided 135% of the allowable square footage or their actual square footage through the routine and major maintenance formulas. That bill did not make it out of the Senate Appropriations Committee this session, but there is a amount of square footage that is not contained within those allocations, and so there's a variety of reasons for that, and we can certainly delve into the details this interim.
So Matt, footage, and our agency folks can help us with this too, is not necessarily enhancements. You know, some of that is leftover square footage that, because those schools were built a long time ago, those sorts of things, but it can be a shed out back that we keep the volleyball net in, right? And
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And I do think there will be, as this Campbell County High School construction and the Sweetwater County, or the Rock Springs High School construction takes place in Sweetwater County. Those buildings, I believe, are in excess of their allowable square footage. And when that construction is complete, it should take some of that excess square footage off of the inventory, right sizing some of that square footage. So that's something to look forward to down the road. It'll still be on the inventory for a while until those projects are complete, but all that's interrelated. And we can certainly bring some context on just some modifications to the major maintenance formula. Recall last year, the multiplier on the cost replacement value was increased from 2% to 2.5%, which was about a $35 million increase annually. So more allocations through the major maintenance funding started occurring this fiscal year. So we can certainly kind of go back in time and bring up to speed where the formulas have come from.
yeah, thank you for Matt. Committee, I hope that makes sense. I just think it's important, you know, when we come back to share with our colleagues that we kind of have a pretty deep understanding of. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm recalling the meetings that we talked about security funding, and we didn't quite have a formula. And I don't remember exactly if that was in our letter to Management Council. I think we asked for potentially consultant on that. Is that potentially going to be covered in some of these? I mean, I don't think it's major maintenance or ADMs, but how do we handle that? Because I know the court brought up security as a potential issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanya. And by the way, I did see that topic that I brought up was right at the top, and I just didn't look down on the sheet. So I'll catch up, everybody, really. Tanya, take it away. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, you are correct. The select committee on, I'm also struggling this morning. Perhaps I need some caffeine as well. on recalibration does have that on their list to study. But it's more related to personnel, I believe, but I'm sure that Director McComey and Administrator Carlson can speak to their work on this. There was an appropriation in the bill for some of this, and so they've been working on prioritizing those needs with school districts. And I think Director McComey has spoken to this maybe towards the end of the interim last year.
Director McComey, good morning.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr.
Welcome to
Chairman.
both of you.
Delbert McComey, I'm the Director for the State Construction Department. Yeah, safety and security, I think, is going to be brought up also with our commission. Last year, and we were fortunate to get 10 million this year for safety and security upgrades. If you recall from that, we're looking at 2 to 3 million of that going for vestibules and bollards, and primarily what we're anticipating that'll go towards design of those and not necessarily construction. And then the remaining to go to various items, and it's kind of through a grant program or a program that the commission needs to set up where the districts will apply and then be funded out of that remaining funds from this year. We did do that study where we asked the districts last year between, I think it was our August and October meeting with Select, what was their number one and number two priorities. And if I recall the dollars, and it's pretty high level, Shelby's probably got it memorized, but it's like $35 million that they just for their top two items within the districts. For history for the committee, back in 2014, there was, I think, $9.5 million given for safety and security. That was delayed in going out until the department performed a study. And so the department hired a consultant, went out and looked at every individual building, assessed each building, and there was quite a few criteria that they looked at. Those were ranked from, say, number one being, do you have door locks on your buildings? And believe it or not, in some cases we didn't. And so those were broke down by individual building per district. We have not done an assessment since that time. Interestingly enough, the topics that you just brought up, a couple of those, I met with the WASBO folks, the business members for the districts here earlier this week. And that was one of their topics was the enhancement discussion. The major maintenance, the 115 to 135, and then safety and security were really the big topics that we talked about that they were interested in. Another one that I think is going to demand some debate, and I don't know if it's necessarily this year, but I think well into the future, you're seeing a switch from this, you need to go to college to you need to go to CTE programs. And so what does CTE look like in the future for schools? And for this committee, what do we build for CTE space in the future? So I think that's something, at least internally, we'll be looking at and talking with the commission on. You had brought up, Mr. Chairman, some of these schools on the what we're seeing as a decline in the number of students in schools almost across the state. I think there's 3 or 4 districts that are seeing they're either holding steady or they're going up, but everybody else is going down. And significantly in a number of the particular larger districts, we're seeing declines 300, 400 students a year. And so I think from my poster child that I'll throw out to you, and I think we've discussed this before, the superintendent, I believe, was online, is up at Newcastle. And so that school actually was one of the pipeline schools that was between the Campbell ruling and when the department formed and kind of started up and what they termed a pipeline school. And so that's their primary school. It's not something that they could say, get rid of and move the students somewhere else. It's their high school, junior high level school. And I think it's at what, 40% capacity?
Or
less right now. And so when we talk about major maintenance funding for that, they're only getting 40% of what it takes to maintain that building, and they can't go anywhere else. And we have examples of that around the state. So I welcome that discussion. I think that's something we could perhaps provide to you all, is we could look at those schools that are, say, 80 or 80% and give you a listing of where they're at. And I think it'll be surprising that somehow I think we do need to address some of these schools that are losing that capacity and can't, for example, here in Laramie 1, where they're actually going to take some schools offline as they build new schools to try and right size where they're at. Casper's been doing the same thing. But in Newcastle, that's their school. There's no way to take something offline for that.
Yeah,
So
and there's no way to make that building smaller.
that's correct.
You can't shut a half a school down. So, yeah, very well stated, Director. I want to come back to Representative Provenza. You had asked the question and we launched into a pretty good discussion there. So do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to know if we need to cover this because I know we talked about it. We don't have a formula. We talked about, do we do it by ADM? But schools are so different in terms of security and the need for them it might be very different in districts. As you mentioned, the door situation, I mean, locks. I have word salad this morning. I think we're all suffering from a
Yeah.
lack of
Yeah,
rest, even if we are sleeping.
It's
Um,
it's tough. Yeah, everybody get
Yeah.
the pass this morning. So
yeah, so I just want to
But-
know if
yeah.
that's something that we need to address because we did ask management council, I think, to help with that. Do we need to come back to this and complete what we started last year? Or are we in good shape and we let the recalibration folks talk about the school resource officers and leave the discussion at that? I don't want to leave this alone if it needs to be completed.
Director, what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
on
Mr.
that?
Chairman, I think for this interim, what I would propose is, again, we look at the districts for exactly what they need and try and get some funding for that, those first two items that they have. But I do think down the road, and this was my discussion with the districts, since it's been over 10 years since we've done an assessment of buildings, there's been $40-50 million worth of safety money provided to the districts. The technology changes that are out there, how we handle school safety today versus 10 years ago or 15 years ago is different. That I think it probably would behoove the department, and that would be a request maybe for some funding for us to hire a consultant to come out and do another big assessment and see where we stand and where we're at. We built literally billions of dollars of new buildings, and those I think are in a totally different place than older buildings that are 40 years plus old as far as safety and security. We are attending the SRO meeting, and so we've got Paul Tim, who helped with part of the assessment before. We're bringing him in to do two kind of keynote speeches and then do some other training. And I think what's going to come out of this is kind of a better understanding for the department to see where we're at. I mean, we're hearing from the facility managers and the superintendents. These are the top two items we need right now. But I think if you go back to the original assessment, there was $70-some million. Now this is 2015 dollars, $70-some million identified as needs at that point in time. We haven't spent near that to date. And so there's obviously some deficiencies that need to be taken care of. And I think if we can identify those and prioritize those, I think that would be the thing to do. So maybe that's a request we come through, and then next year we can work on this study in between to try and provide this committee and the legislature a better understanding of where we sit with safety.
Yeah, Director, and just this is just from my standpoint. I would sure like to see this committee play a big role all the way through. I don't want to hand that baton, to a recalibration committee when school facilities is what we are. I mean, we're the ones that should do this deep dive and be ready to defend and extrapolate and do the things necessary for our schools out there. But just to tag on, Director, I remember we did a site visit up at Teton County, and from the safety standpoint, standing out front, I know Senator Dockstader was there. We were standing out in front of the high school there, and it was very clear that, and I ended up being the one to bring up, we need a vestibule on this place. And that's why that addition occurred over there in Teton County. It was really this committee that realized, you know, we have to take this remodel up there a little bit further. And so sometimes it really does help to put boots on the ground. And I think maybe the vice chairman and I can talk about a place or two that we might be able to do that. It always helps to get out there and just kind of look around at what we've got. So, and you're right, Director, it might be, we would want to take a look at what we've done this past 15 years. But what about before then? There's two different strata of buildings out across. So anyway, questions of the Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whomever would like to address this on this concept of the number of students per building. I just texted all three of my superintendents this morning that I deal with, the districts I deal with. I said up or down on average. Two of my districts are kind of in a downturn, one holding steady. So how do we adjust this with our buildings? We got a situation where we got too much building for the number of students now across the state. Whoever would like
Yeah,
to
so-
address that?
Matt, we'll come back to you. Let's go to the director first. Yeah, it's probably our number one issue, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you know, it's interesting how times change. So when I came in 2015 as a director, we were actually as a state on an incline, and we had an awful lot of projects that we were looking at from a capacity standpoint. This committee, capacity and condition were the two big drivers. And actually, I think it was capacity that was driving most of that discussion at that point in time. It has since turned around. It's a national thing. We've been tracking what's happening in Colorado, Utah, for example. I mean, they're even, I think, in worse shape than we are. They're closing 8, 10 buildings at a time in districts. And so you have seen in Wyoming a number of the districts take advantage of, well, not take advantage. They're trying to right size where they're at. Casper, I don't know, 6 schools have taken offline. We're taking some offline here, but we're also increasing the size for efficiency on the number of students in some of the elementaries here. So there are buildings coming offline here. Rock Springs, Campbell, you talked about that square footage. So as we build these new schools, both of those are roughly about 100,000 square foot is coming off of those compared to the old schools. So that helps drive that down as we modernize new schools. But there certainly is an issue, like I pointed out in Newcastle and some of our smaller districts where you have a school. I mean, Shoshone, if you take a look at that, that's a K-12. You can't downsize it. I mean, it is what it is. And so what we're reading, what the literature's showing is we probably are going to see a downturn in the United States for the next 20 years. It's really a generational thing to where that can turn around and you know, we'll maybe see a population increase. So kicking around since we didn't get to 115 to 135, and Mr. Chairman, I would hope we could run that bill or a similar type of bill next year, have the explanation on this enhancements and on this major maintenance and all of that to better educate the legislature as a whole as to why that's needed. But I think at a minimum, some of these schools that are like 40%, 30% full, maybe we ought to have a threshold that says on that particular school, you need to at least be funded at 70% or 80% for those individual schools. And that's something we certainly have the data on. We can certainly provide that to your staff to make those calculations on a yearly basis as we see these trends moving up and down. Because we see right now, we've got a substantial downturn here. We've got a substantial downturn in Campbell County. But they just got some new business. We got a whole bunch of data centers. So nationwide, we're seeing this trend down. But what if economic development brings in to move stuff up? Where I think if we get into these situations where we're really out of balance, maybe if we have a minimum that you fund a building at would be the way to go, or an option.
Director, thank you. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that front? One thing in particular that I wanted to ask you in relation to a good question by Senator Dockstader. So we just alluded to the fact that Casper and Natrona took 2 schools offline. one was out in Bar None, a relatively new school. And at the same time, we built a charter school over in Mills, and I drive by both of them every now and then, wonder, why in the world did we do that? Now, this committee is dealing with the fact that if a charter school is built, we do have to rent that facility. We have to lease it. The facility in Mills, you might remember, was a line item of 1.8, I think, for the biennium. That's substantial. So I wonder, Matt, if we couldn't make sure that to ask of you that we understand exactly where that statute points to and what our options are. It's too bad that we weren't able to utilize a school that had to be shut down. I mean, it was all ready to go. And so take it away. Any thoughts on this whole front, Matt?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Senator Dockstader, I think each district's going to have their own unique situation. And what happens in, Weston 1 for Newcastle is going to be a little bit different than what happens in Natrona. And I think those are some of the tough conversations that maybe the commission has to have with some of those districts where you do need to, offload some of these buildings, but maybe you don't offload them and sell them, you just mothball them. Because I do think there are some facilities that districts have sold and they've been refurbished and now we're paying a lease on them. And so if it was good enough to, dispose of at the district level, but now it's being reutilized and we're paying a lease on it, maybe those are just some conversations that districts and the commission have to have about mothballing. But each district's going to be a little bit unique. We can run the numbers for each of the districts and show you how much excess or square footage are not being resourced through the routine and major maintenance formulas. And I think the 135% allocated all the square footage for about 19 school districts. So there's still about, what's that? Almost 30 districts or 29 districts that are still not being allocated their full square footage. But some of these conversations are very nuanced in that prior to 1997, pools were funded by the local property taxes, and those aren't considered an enhancement. But when they build a new one, they are. And so there sometimes in some school districts that square footage is counted as part of the educational square footage. In some instances, it's not. And so each district has its own unique situation. We can identify what those are. And so I think the conversation on paying actual or a minimum might be a good solution for some of those districts. But some of the districts just may have to eliminate some of that square footage. And I know that's occurred up in Fremont County and in Riverton. And so this stuff takes time because construction doesn't happen overnight. It's a moving target.
Tanya, any thoughts? And Shelby, I'll come to you too. I appreciate this is kind of the global perspective to get us into the interim. So,
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is that you have modified that statute related to charter schools a number of times over the last couple of years. So it is an issue, as Matt said, that's sort of a moving target. And as you learn more, you've modified that statute. I think at one point, the department was charged with identifying adequate and available square footage, and that turned out in practice not to work so well. So as Matt said, it's sort of a moving target, but you have looked at this and modified that statute.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. And really, the committee, it's not a good or a bad. It's just understanding where the statute is and decisions we've made and how that impacts what we're doing. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that point, I feel like we must have it wrong at this point. We have looked at it. We've changed it a few times, but I share your concerns about building a new school in Mills at the same time as we know we've got 6 offline schools in the NCSD school district. So whatever we did allowed that to happen. And then we know that we're statutorily obligated to pay the lease fees for that school. So that's going to happen again. something should have been done, like most cost-effective remedy for that charter school. We never should have built that school in Mills, and we'll be paying for that school. Someone else owns the school. We'll be paying for it. And I don't know that we could get ourselves out of that circumstance. I'm sure they signed a long-term lease. I don't know that, but I would imagine they signed a long-term lease. Maybe I'd ask the directors, is that the case?
Director McComey?
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Shelby Carlson, School Facilities Division Administrator. In those cases, usually the newer schools, they are signing long-term leases, like 25 years. And we're very clear when we talk with them, we can only guarantee money in 2 years increment, you know, it always has to go before the legislature. So they're aware of that. Along those lines, one is to back up, bar none, actually Natrona will be before the commission on April 1st, asking to mothball the Bar None Elementary School. And then after some of our discussions last year, I went back and looked at like Mountain View and some of those schools that have been taken offline in Natrona. And while they would have worked for those for Wyoming Classical the first couple of years, they're not big enough for the enrollment that they have now. So it kind of brings us back to the conversation we had before. You're looking into a charter school, you've got to put a business plan together. Well, they would have outgrown that school in 2 or 3 years and needed more space anyway. So, and we are paying for a new school. We pay the same amount no matter what school they're in. It's all based on their ADM, allowable square footage, their lease costs, all those things. We will never pay more than what they're paying for a lease. But then we use the lesser of the two of their allowable or their actual. So we pay the same amount no matter what building they're in. Now, I think on the block grant side, that's a little different because they look at the age of the building. So the newer the building is, I think the lower the amount is. So there's some of those pieces in play. The other thing I wanted to bring up about Fremont 25, Mr. Wilmarth brought it up, but you know, we started on Fremont County, Fremont 25 in 19. They were 302,000 square feet of excess square footage. They've dropped over 200,000, but it's taken us till now to get there. We do have a plan in place. The legislature approved the new elementary school in Riverton. In doing that, it will take Rendezvous Elementary School off of line, and that's about 80,000 square feet. So that one will come off. So we're still working away there, but it's a slow process.
So Shelby, back to the charter school issue, and again, not casting shadows in any direction, just trying to understand where we are with our laws and our capabilities, whatever. How much were we able to play a role in what that school looks like or how it was built? If we're signing these long-term leases, I'm getting constituents up home talking about not adequate turnarounds, and facilities would have picked up on and has some standards for certain things. Did they work with our department at all on that building?
Mr. Chairman, in that particular case, no, we were not involved in that at all. We had no discussions with them. Now, some charter schools will come in and talk to us. When the Alpine was coming online and they were first making their approval, they were in talking to us. And we always make our design standards there online. We make sure that they're aware they're there. They're there for anybody to use, so a charter school can use them. So we do have some charter schools who will reach out to us and say, we'd like to use your standards. And if they want help from us, we're certainly happy to walk through those standards with them and work with them. So some do and some do not. So
Pretty global committee to get started this morning. That's all under basically that first topic that we brought up, and we expounded a little bit on that. But Director McComey, you had additions to state statute as an interim look. Do you want to address that for us? What do you got in mind? Senator, go ahead. Senator McEwen.
I'm just curious on the major maintenance funds. Do we pay the charter schools as much as we pay traditional schools, or is it different?
Shelby?
Mr. Chairman, so our payment is for the lease. The statute does require that they take some of that money and put it in a major maintenance account, just like we would. We don't work with them on the amount they get or any of that. And then the lessor is responsible to work with the charter school on the spending of those funds. So we don't pay major maintenance directly, we pay for the lease. And we base that on the average cost of similar type of square footage in that community. If we don't have a state office in that community, then we average it between the two closest and come up with that square footage that we are going to pay. So that's how we pay for it, is just as a lease.
Mr. Chairman and Senator McKeon.
Follow up, Senator, go ahead.
Yeah,
Matt.
Mr. Chairman, there is a little bit more nuanced calculation to it, in that the number of students enrolled in that charter school determine the allowable square footage. So if they have a facility that exceeds that allowable square footage, they're capped at what that allowable square footage is. So again, it ties back to the major maintenance and the routine maintenance formula to say you get the lesser of your actual or your allowable 115% of your allowable square footage. So they can't go lease, a 200,000 square foot facility for 100 kids. They'll be limited on how much square footage will be calculated as part of that lease amount. Additionally, the lease subtracts out any routine maintenance and utilities funding that is allocated through the block grant. So this is required to be a triple net lease, I believe, where, or maybe not a whole triple net, but the lessor is responsible for the major maintenance and the routine maintenance. Or not the routine maintenance, the charter school would be required to do the routine maintenance, but all that is taken into account as part of that lease agreement and the calculation from the state to the district that then passes it along to the charter school. So there is some sideboards on how much that lease can be.
There is.
But it primarily starts with the number of students that are enrolled in that school and the configuration, if it's an elementary or middle or a K-12 or whatever configuration it is.
Yeah. Senator McKeon, does that help? There is a governor on the golf cart, but it is, yeah. Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, it's extremely complicated in how we pay and what we look at, as you're hearing right now. But our staff, Laura and her staff, have put together basically a how-to pamphlet, a guide for the charter schools. We'd be happy to provide that to you soon. We could run it through your LSO staff, but that's something you could look at, and it runs through all these various scenarios on what we either add or subtract, what we pay for, how, all of that. And it's a new guide that we put together, because if you can imagine, with new charter schools coming in, we spend an awful lot of time. Shelby and Laura are kind of our two head, they're taking the lead on that. They spend an awful lot of their time with these charter schools.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Committee, I have to duck out for a conference committee at 9. So if we run over, I'll just turn this over to the vice chairman to finish up. But I did want to get, before we get to that topic, Director, that you have suggested for us, I want to welcome Senator Love to the gang. I forgot to do that to start off with, and it's good to have you on board, Senator. You bring a lot of wealth of knowledge and experience on all of this stuff, so glad to have you on board. Any other question before we go ahead, Senator McKeon. You bet.
Just trying to wrap my head around this as we go into the interim. Do we take money from the ADMs at the charter school and turn it into traditional school major maintenance? Is that what we're looking at here? Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Senator McKeon, the ADM of the charter school will help determine what the square footage that can be paid on that lease agreement. So that's kind of the first step to establish what the square footage amount is. That square footage amount is then multiplied by the average cost in that community. And that'll kind of set the maximum amount of what that lease agreement can be. And then you subtract out utilities, and usually that average cost square foot is the triple net amount, which includes utilities and routine maintenance and the major maintenance. So you subtract out your routine maintenance and your utilities that are allocated through the block grant. And then that leaves the balance of what that lease agreement will go towards the charter schools. But the configuration of the school, whether it's a K-12 or a K-8 or an elementary or whatever, that establishes part of the allowable square footage. And so that's the sideboard, is that initial calculation of what the square footage is.
Mr. Chairman.
So my question is, the ADM count at the charter school, what I'm trying to figure out is, does any of that ADM go into the major maintenance of traditional schools or not?
Mr. Chairman and Senator McKim, apologies for not answering the question. No, those charter school ADM are excluded out of the district's calculation. Any leased facility or any facility that's not part of the district's inventory, those ADM are excluded from the district's calculation. So we're not duplicating the cost amongst that. An example is when the UW Lab School was in operation over in Laramie, the university owned that facility. So those students were not included in the major maintenance calculation for Albany County School District number 1. And no charter schools ADM is included in the ADM calculation unless those students are actually in a district facility. So we don't duplicate that or include those students in the calculation.
Thanks.
Before we leave the topic of safety and security, be thinking, Director, about what role and when this select committee can be of help on that. We look forward to what the commission brings back to us, but I think that covers those topics that we've been bouncing on, and I want to get to the next one, which is statutory things. So please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We asked for 2 reviews, and they're really linked together. They're dealing with your school buildings themselves and the construction activities and the siting of those school buildings. And what we're running into is when we're getting ready to, so you have a couple of scenarios here, and one of them is you have an existing site. And most of the time, districts have existing sites right now. Laramie 1, for example, has a few parcels of land where they plan in the future to place buildings. There are examples like in Jackson, Munger Mountain, where they went out and they had to purchase. What we're asking for, one of the scenarios, is that there be a statute provided that says the state, the school district, and the local county, city government, wherever that jurisdiction may lie, need to get together before that land is purchased. So this would all be new stuff coming up, and collaborate on, is the site appropriate? If it is, what needs to go towards that site? Because what we're running into right now is on some of these existing sites, the school, we plan to go in and build a new building, and we're finding it's kind of isolated. These sites are away from a subdivision or whatever it may be. So we need to provide the sewer lines, might be for a mile, 2 miles, Munger Mountain, many miles of new sewer line, maybe water lines, what kind of infrastructure. They look at roadway costs and all those sort of things. And quite often, some of this stuff crops up after we've already come to you all and asked for money for that school. And so now we're getting these tack-ons, and in some cases right now, we're looking at multi-millions of dollars added in after we've asked for the funding for the school, because of what the local communities are asking for reviews as this thing is going through the design process. And so I think it would be more proactive, I think on everybody's part, that in the future that we all sit down at the table ahead of time and work through to see if that truly the most cost-effective place to put a school. The business managers kind of chuckled when I told them what it seems like is we get in these particularly larger subdivisions, we get some land that's allocated for a school to go into some of these subdivisions. But guess where it's at? It's in the swamp. It's in the hole. It's in the least desirable space on that property. And that's why they're getting it. And maybe we're getting it at a little lower cost because of that. But the true cost is we're probably paying twice, 3 times if we'd have gone out and bought something in a better location. So I think that's a discussion to be held. Tied to that then is when we have these sites, and it really is community dependent. It varies in every community in the state of what the requirements are now for what's needed in the siting of that building. Trees, sidewalks, roadway improvements, street lights, roundabouts, paving, infrastructure. The schools are actually being looked at as almost a developer, and all we're doing is building the school, but there's a lot of vacant land around, and so we, the state, are paying for these lines. Can we get recapture agreements when somebody else comes in? It's interesting when we have these discussions at the school boards, you'll watch 3 or 4 developers sitting in there just rubbing their hands going, man, they're going to pay for all this infrastructure. They're going to put the road in, going to reduce my costs.
Sure.
They're just waiting for that school to go in. So the second part of that then is Mr. Chairman, you attended the meeting, but you and Senator Rothfuss, where we had Utah come in and look at how we're doing business on the school side just here a couple of months ago. They provided us a lot of statutes that Utah has on that front end of that meeting. And in looking at theirs, there's a statute that kind of limits those additional costs that communities or counties are placing on the schools. I think it's, in my opinion only, that we're the cash cow. It's the state of Wyoming. We can provide a lot of money when we come in on those. And so I think there needs to be kind of a look at what that's also driving.
Oh, I think that's a good suggestion, Director. And I think the committee would find that to be very educational, and I know I would. So I think that's a good topic for us to delve into a little bit. Committee, anything on that front? Any questions on that front? Tanya, back to you. Do you have any other thoughts that we need to make sure and touch on or cover during this interim? And maybe you can remind us of what those dates are. Do you have those in front of you?
Mr. Chairman, I have
May-
those dates.
Thank you so much.
So your first meeting is May 7th. Your second meeting is scheduled for August 25th,
25.
2/5. And then your third meeting is scheduled for October 20th. And Mr. Chairman, you have not set a location for any of those meetings at this time. And I will be sending calendar invites for all of you after this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. The Vice Chairman and I can visit about things with the staff and see what, like I said, I'd love to make it educational along with the meeting itself. I have found it to be really beneficial to get to some of the schools. It's really worked well. And so if we can pull that off, we'll sure try to do it. But we're constrained by budget on committee meetings these days, as you guys know, and so we'll have to work within the confines of what Management Council wants us to be up to. These are single day meetings, so that will come into play as the Vice Chairman and I work on that. So,
Mr.
Tanya?
Chairman, in the past, when you've made those requests for like these educational meetings, you've asked for a day and a half. And I appreciate the Management Council is sort of taking a harder look at that. But when you submit your letter, you could let them know that you anticipate those visits. And in the prior years, they have authorized that.
And I fully understand if management council does not want to let us do that, but if we do, sometimes coming in that afternoon before the meeting and getting out on it, on the district ground, I have found that to be really informative. We toured a couple of schools in Natrona that have been renovated, and I thought that was really, really eye-opening what can be done with, if you have good bones in a structure, you know, there's some things you can do to stand a school back up. So anyway, we'll work on that. Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, when you're contemplating the day or day and a half request, a couple of things that just are standard. Again, Mr. Chairman, for your August meeting, you know, we've kind of worked with your LSO staff to let them know when our commission meetings are. We plan those a year ahead. And so the time in between. So for your August meeting, we'll bring in the budget to discuss. And then in October, you know, you generally work the final of that, but we'll come with that preview as soon as we can for you all. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, and you and the Vice Chair both are serving on the Adequacy Standards Committee. So we're reviewing the adequacy standards, design standards right now. We've hired a consultant, and we're going to have 4 meetings with the group. So we've got a number of school districts on there, yourselves, 2 of our commissioners, the chair and vice chair, are on there. And so we're required, anything that's going to go into that rulemaking process, which these do, to bring those and keep this committee up to speed on the progress of that. So when you're figuring some time into your meetings, it'd probably be good to have a little bit of time structured as we move forward. I think here in the near future is the first 4-hour meeting for that group to come up and kick off. We'll get you those firm dates on that. And then we plan 2 other 2-hour meetings, and then towards the end of that, another 4-hour meeting to kind of wrap that up. So, Mr. Chairman, we look forward to you and the vice chair both
Well,
be
yeah,
serving on that.
Representative
So.
and I are going to get a lot of quality time with you there.
You are, Mr.
Good,
Chairman.
that'll be good.
So I just wanted to point those out as kind of those things that are going to be gap fillers besides all the stuff we just talked about today. So
I'm not trying to hurry the committee. I do have to take off, Madam Vice Chair. I think, you know, there may be some public comment, and thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Committee, good to see everyone, and congratulations on all the work done during this session. I think on the school facilities front, we did very, very well, and I'm proud of that effort. Going to return a lot to our communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll let you get off to your next JCC meeting. Enjoy. And first of all, I would like to open this up for public comment. If anybody has any public comment. Anybody in the room? Oh, we have someone. Welcome. If you could share who you are, state your name, and then we'd love to listen.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Carrie Klein with the Wyoming Public Charter School Association. Didn't think I'd have to speak this morning, but apparently we've got some discussion here. So first of all, really do appreciate the discussion. I think that, you know, last year, appreciate the director and his staff. Sat down with them last year, really talked about the facilities piece with charter schools. And I think we're all in agreement that, as you already have witnessed, there are some challenges and that we need to have some frank and honest discussions about the charter schools and facilities in particular and how they're funded. So just offer a couple of thoughts this morning. First of all, remember this, when we talk about leases for charter schools, it is not a blank check. There are sideboards in place, there are calculations. So a charter school is not able to just build the biggest, fanciest building they want and the state writes the check. So I'm glad to see that there was a little bit of discussion around those. Also, I think as discussed, it's different from district to district. And it's my understanding that the districts hold the power here when they have open buildings. Some districts choose to let a charter school utilize that building. Some districts have chosen not to let a charter school use an empty facility that they had in their community. And while we'd like to recognize the fiscal responsibility that we owe to the state on facilities that you have already built, we also don't want to see a case where our public charter schools and those students are relegated to the buildings that the district choose to mothball. Okay, so we don't want to have our public school students in inappropriate facilities as well. So appreciate the work that we've done so far in the last few years. I think we've made progress. I'm very appreciative for the policy decisions to support the public charter schools and their facilities. And just wanted to offer my help in this area. Willing to sit down with any of you, the committee, either in a committee meeting if you choose to do something during the interim on this, or separately. We've already had discussions with the department about how we can facilitate those discussions and try and come up with a solution that really is sustainable and works to further take advantage of what we have in the state, and also recognize that our public charter school students they need to also have great facilities. So open to any questions you might have this morning.
Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak? No one? All right. Committee, any, so we're going to close public comment unless is there any online? No? Okay. Committee, what's your pleasure? What do you want to, what is your, any discussion on any of the topics? Do I want to entertain a motion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, I think that the topics that we have before us and we've discussed are appropriate, and that you and good Senator Lannon could probably work those into some interim topics, and have confidence in you in doing that. I do think that coming back with revisiting the 135% from 115% allowable square footage, and even getting into the deeper conversations about our schools where that might be insufficient, but what are we going to do with Newcastle? What are we going to do with Shoshone? Coming up with a system that just allows for that to be appropriately funded. Maybe we look into that a little bit, and that's of value. Obviously, we talked about security. That's going to be important. And I do think that revisiting again how we engage appropriately with charter schools so that we can have that conversation ahead of time. I think part of the problem with the Mills experience was that we had no control. We had no input on the front end, and we knew, and they knew, that we would be paying the bill. They knew how much the bill was because it is in statute. You can do the calculation yourself, figure out, you know, exactly what school you can build for the dollars that you'll have available, and know that for 25 years, the state will be on the hook to pay for that lease. And I don't like that we did that process, but I do certainly agree with the presentation. We're obligated to provide high quality educational experience for our public charter school students, and they should have access to appropriate schools. So we've got more work to do there.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else like to comment? Senator Love.
Thank you. We briefly touched on CTE earlier when you were having the conversation about school safety and security, and some of the things that can occur there. I would like to add into one of these topics. So 30 years ago, going through school, each high school had its own auto body, diesel tech, a lot of different things, wood shop. We still have some of that for welding and framing and woodworking. And I've seen some new systems, though, come online that allow for alternate graduation opportunities for high school students that are having 90+% placement rates right out of high school into the job career fields. In Colorado, I believe they call them innovation centers. And they're off-campus sites that multiple schools help manage. Instead of having all the individual facilities to work with, you have one central location in your larger population areas that handle all of that. And they do an array of things. I had a nephew just graduated from one this year that he went straight in as a machinist working on CNC machines and is doing an awesome thing with some of the companies in Colorado. So I wonder if maybe we need to start looking at facilities a little differently as we approach that and save on our maintenance costs by having centralized locations rather than 5 different locations in the same community. So just a thought.
Thank you, Senator. Would the department like to comment on that at all? You thought you were out of this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chair. The it is interesting how this has really taken off, I think, in just the last 2 or 3 years in Wyoming. Shelby and I actually participate in a group that's called Next Gen here in Cheyenne, go to their meetings, having it kind of quarterly type of meetings. And it's really industry sits at the table. We kind of sit around the back of the room, and they're talking about the needs for CTE, for plumbers, electricians, all those sort of things, particularly with the database centers coming in. Private industry in Cheyenne is really struggling with the loss of their employees, even long-term employees, because of just the funding amount that they can toss out to hire an electrician. $150 an hour is what's going on here. And so companies that have had 50, 70 employees are down to 20 or 12 or whatever. And so Laramie One and LCCC are at that table, and they do a lot of presentations and what's that look like in the future and what do we need. And it's just not here. So Campbell County, they've got a great big building. Industry helped pay for part of that. So when we're building the new school there, they're going to kind of keep that. One of the proactive things that we did this last year is when we're sizing new schools, our typical those wood shop, the larger CTE spaces, and not all CTE is created equal. There's different square footages depending on the type of CTE. But those larger ones, we went from 125 feet per square or per student, square foot per student, to 200. So we gave them additional space. Even though we did that at Rock Springs, it's 600 or 700 students waiting to get into their current spaces they have right now. Rock Springs, even though they're designing to build this brand new building, they went out and purchased another building from industry because of that need there. And it's their type of community, and it's industrial, oil field, whatever type of industry that really keeps that part of the state going. And so I think there is a need to look at that, and we're doing that within the adequacy standards. So, Madam Chair, you'll be, sitting in that and having that discussion. Our vice chair for school facilities has done an awful lot of that type of work, and they added extra square footage when they built the Shoshone K-12. He's fairly passionate on that also. So I think we'll have a good makeup of the committee that can address that. Now, exactly, this is happening fast. Buildings take time to do that. And so those very discussions are going on throughout the state. CTE at the K-12 level, if you look at the statutes, is actually kind of tied to the community college level also. They're supposed to work kind of hand in hand on some of those spaces. So I think that's a larger discussion for the committee, and certainly welcome any discussion the committee wants to start with on that. So.
Thank you. Is there any follow-up? Now, Senator Love, I think you touch on we are in an innovation in education for that very thing, and we'll be happy to bring back from the facilities management to give a report to this committee and keep it on the forefront. I think we'll be seeing that change over the next couple of years when, schools are starting to feed our industry, and not just those community colleges, but K through 12. It'll be an important piece. I know my own kids have gone into machining and things like that. So it's a huge thing, and thanks for bringing it up. I think that will be an issue over the next few years. All right, committee. Any other discussion? No? Well, I would be, so just for the public's notice, what we're looking at is student ADMs in the relation to major maintenance levels and within districts, and then additions to state statute, and how we're going to try to bring all of the shareholders to the table to try to not just to allow the state to be the cash cow as we heard, but to be a partner. So I would entertain any motions on our two topics, and we can be done.
Madam Chair, I would add you have the statutory obligations, and so typically that's listed as your first interim topic If you
Okay.
look at the prior letters, and many of the items that Director McCombie spoke to could be under that umbrella as
Okay.
well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Anybody?
Madam Chair.
Yes,
I don't think we need-
Representative.
Thank you. I don't think we need to make a formal motion.
Okay.
It's the chairman's prerogative
All right.
to have more conversation about where we're going
right.
and then you have the power to take that to management.
All right, I will
council.
take that. So we're going to look at statutory obligations, additions to state statute and how that works, and our student ADMs. And I will, unless there's anything that our staff has for us.
Madam Chair, we will prepare a draft letter and submit it to you and Chairman Landon to review, and you can, revise it.
All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.